Welcome to another Brewha video. In this video, we are brewing 20 liters or 5 gallons of sarsaparilla or sarsaparilla root beer in the Brewha small 20-liter, 5-gallon kombucha, hard seltzer, liquor, and root beer brewing kit, which is available in the online store at brewha.com. Traditionally, root beer was made with sassafras, but that is hard to get these days since the FDA banned it. So we'll be using sarsaparilla root exclusively, along with cane sugar, molasses, licorice root, and a few other flavoring ingredients. We'll be fermenting with a scobby, taking a couple liters from an existing root beer batch we have and adding it to this one. Other recipes call for gingerbug or clean fermenting beer yeast can also be used, such as a Kvike or Voss by Lallemand or Lutra by Omega. Experiment with a few batches and see what you like best. The sarsaparilla we're brewing today will be in the smallest of the Brewha brewing systems, but the steps we use can be copied with all 8 of our larger systems, right up to the 15-barrel or 18 hectoliter size. This recipe is on the recipe page of our website, and while these are delicious recipes in their own right, variations on ingredients can certainly be made. Heating water. The first step is to bring the water to boil. The Brewha system includes a high-quality stainless steel immersion heater, temperature sensor, and power controller with the larger systems to heat the water with. Boiling the water kills any microbes and also sanitizes the inside of the fermenter, so that when fermentation starts, it is just the microbes you add that ferment, not any wild yeast or bacteria or molds that might spoil your beverage. The lid can be installed when heating. Just ensure that a port is removed so that air steam can vent, and always have the pressure vacuum relief installed and test it regularly to ensure it's working as designed. Insert the large filter or hop spider so that it is sanitized at the same time as the water is boiling. Don't use distilled water, as some minerals are beneficial to fermentation and pH buffering, so they need to be in the water. If RO, reverse osmosis, or distilled water is used, brewing salt should be added back in. There's an introductory article on water chemistry on our website which discusses more. Turn the controller on and start heating the water. Once the water is warm, about 40 Celsius or 105 Fahrenheit, and will readily dissolve sugar, pause the heater and add the sugar and molasses. Sugar shouldn't just be dumped in because it will drop to the bottom undissolved. It can be added into the hot basket where it can be stirred and dissolved, or some hot water can be removed to a pot with the sugar dissolved there, and then added back to the fermenter. If stirring inside the fermenter itself, just be careful not to hit the heating element or the sensor. Remove a little water out of the bottom port to see if any solid sugar had settled there, and return that into the hot basket. Turning the heaters off during this addition minimizes the risk of sugar sticking to the heater and scorching. Once the sugar is dissolved, add the roots: sarsaparilla, licorice, dandelion, and birch bark. Replace the lid, turn the power back on, and continue to heat it up. Boiling. Once up to a boil, the power can be turned down to about 20%, and the water just simmered for 15 minutes. The boiling water sanitizes the tank, and the steam produced here will sanitize the lid. Flush a bit of boiling water through the side and the bottom ports to ensure that cold water is not trapped there and the heat sanitizes the port. Then rinse the outside ports off with a Star San solution so that microbes don't start to grow on any sugar residuals that might have deposited there. The pressure gauge can be held partway over the venting steam for a minute so it is sanitized, and/or spray it with a sanitizer like Star San. To reduce the heat loss, it's best to keep the jacket empty during heat up and boil. Cooling water. At the end of the boil, turn the heaters off and add late additions such as ginger and anise. Adding to the just boiled water will sanitize the ingredients. The spoon or mixer used to stir the additions should be kept on a sanitized surface, as we'll use it later to stir the cooled water. After a short period, about 5 minutes, remove the filter basket, then return the lid. As mentioned, keep a port open and always leave the pressure vacuum relief installed. Then attach cold water source, like tap water, to the jacket. Use a water pressure regulator on the inlet port of the jacket to ensure that pressure does not build up and damage the tank. It will take about 20 to 30 minutes for cold tap water to cool the water down to room temperature. Cooling time is dependent on the temperature and the flow rate of cold water and the volume of water being chilled relative to the surface area. So for the small tank, cool down is about 20 to 30 minutes. For larger tanks, it'll be larger. So for faster cooling, one of our plate chillers, either using cold tap water, or if it's not cold enough, pre-chilled water from our cold liquor tank, can be used with a plate chiller. There's a video on our website for more information on this. Add or pitch the SCOBY. Once the water is down to room temperature, about 20 Celsius or 70 Fahrenheit, first stirring it with a sanitized spoon or using a mixer. Stirring it serves to equalize the temperature as well as introducing a bit of oxygen. In the larger tanks, after removing any sediment that settled to the bottom port, oxygen can be bubbled up into the wort to equilibrate the temperature. When using an aeration stone to put the oxygen in, put it in boiling water for a few minutes first to ensure that it is sanitary. Once the temperature is uniform, add the SCOBY according to supplier instructions. In our case today, we'll be using about 10% by volume of sarsaparilla kombucha from a previous batch that we had. This will inoculate our tea with the SCOBY, as well as dropping the pH a little, making it more acidic, to help minimize the risk of harmful microbes like molds getting established. Fermentation. Once the SCOBY is added, we put a gas-permeable covering over one of the openings. We want to keep flies and dust out, which might carry harmful microbes, but let air, which has oxygen, in. We're using a coffee filter, but tight woven cloth also works. Unlike beer production, where oxygen is only needed early in fermentation and harmful for flavor later in fermentation, oxygen is necessary throughout the fermentation process when making sarsaparilla with SCOBY. With the 208 to 240 volt systems, temperature can be maintained throughout fermentation by setting the temperature set point and keeping the heaters on auto. If fermenting above room temperature, put the power output to less than 3% so the heating is very gentle and there isn't any risk of scorching. You'll want to heat the fermenter if you're wanting to elevate the fermentation temperature above room temperature. The power controller for heating is only needed if you're wanting to ferment at or above room temperature. If fermenting at or below room temperature, then you only need a water chiller to regulate fermentation temperature. Carbonation. To know if your beverage is ready for consumption, fermentation can be tracked by monitoring the amount of sugar using a hydrometer or refractometer and comparing the amount of sugar to the amount that was at the beginning. As yeast consume sugar, they produce carbon dioxide and ethanol. Less sugar means more carbon dioxide and more ethanol. And with SCOBY, fermentation progress can also be tracked by measuring the pH. Using a pH meter is the most accurate, but strips can also be used. As bacteria consume ethanol, they produce acids, which lower the pH. Acidity below 3.5 is the target, and below that, according to taste. Once you've determined that the sarsaparilla has completed fermentation, the pellicle can be removed, with the floating cellulose pucker mother, and the sarsaparilla carbonated. Carbonation can occur by adding a bit more sugar. Sanitize the sugar by dissolving it in boiling water before adding it to the fermenter, and letting the sarsaparilla carbonate naturally as the yeast feed on the new sugar and produce carbon dioxide. Or a regulator can be used and gas added to the tank. In a commercial setting, there will be CO2 tanks and commercial regulators to add CO2. For pilot systems or home brewing, there are many regulators on the market that use mini gas tanks such as the blue CO2 bottles by SodaStream and their competitors. There are carbonation gas charts on our website, but the level of carbonation depends on your tastes. For sarsaparilla stored at 20 Celsius or 70 Fahrenheit, a low-level carbonation typical for sarsaparilla will need about 8 psi of CO2 for 3 or 4 days, a higher level for higher carbonation. Because the sarsaparilla using SCOBY for fermentation has air in the top, for faster carbonation, first purge the air out a few times to remove the nitrogen and oxygen that is in there so that more CO2 is present, or bubble CO2 up using the racking arm. If putting gas in below the water level, be sure that the beverage doesn't infiltrate back into your gas line, which will contaminate it. So either use a check valve or run the gas line above the water level, so if the beverage enters, it doesn't reach the regulator. Storage and serving. To preserve the high quality state of your beverage, it should be stored at or around fridge temperature. Our water chillers can be used to run ice-cold water through the jacket of your fermenter to lower the temperature. Note that since more CO2 can dissolve in water at lower temperature, the gas pressure should be lowered for a given carbonation volume. You can search on our website for more information on carbonation. Once chilled and carbonated, your beverage is ready for serving. Keg it, can it, or dispense it directly from the tank using one of our dispensers. For SCOBY fermented root beer, remember to keep 10% for inoculating your next batch. This can be done by keeping the racking arm pointing up. The volume from the top of the racking arm to the bottom of the cone is approximately 10%. With the racking arm pointing up, when the sarsaparilla runs dry, the remaining can be removed out the bottom dump port. Sanitize the exterior first. I hold a pot of just boiled water over the port and then spray it with Star San. The recovered root beer with SCOBY in it can then be placed into a second fermenter with tea or held in a sanitized holding vessel until ready to pitch in your next batch. And that's how simple it is to brew sarsaparilla on the Brewhouse system.